Douglas Murray, thank you so much for being with us.
It's a great pleasure to be with you.
I'd love to just get your initial reactions to the strikes this morning.
My first reaction is I'm not surprised by the strikes. I don't think anyone is, if they've followed the buildup of forces in the region in recent weeks. I think that what will perhaps have flummoxed some people is something they shouldn't be flummoxed by if they follow the way in which President Trump tends to operate, which is that he says you've got to do X on the count of 3. And then it's rather like that old trick of going 1, 2, 3. Mm-hmm. He gives a deadline, and when it becomes clear that the person or the country, the regime he's trying to negotiate with is clearly not going to make that deadline, he doesn't wait for them to just keep stringing him along, but just acts. And I think that's what we saw from the statement that he issued in the early hours of this morning. Mm-hmm. It was clear that he, in his view, had simply that the Iranians were, the Iranian Revolutionary Government were simply stringing him and other parties along, and he decided not to be strung along any longer. So in one way it's surprising, in another it's really sort of textbook Trump.
You've spoken with the president and have spoken about these issues with him in particular. Take us into his mindset. And I ask because he's a president who campaigned on the idea of getting America out of foreign conflicts, America first. It's why his base largely likes him. And still, in his administration, we've seen multiple entanglements. Iran in June in the 12-day war, deposing Maduro in Venezuela, launching strikes in Nigeria. And yet his supporters are still placing trust in him, though some in the MAGA base are clearly upset. How do you explain his mindset right now?
Well, I think it's crucial just to pick up on one word you used. You used the word entanglements, and I think that's exactly the opposite of what President Trump's foreign policy has been.
Explain that.
Well, each of the cases you gave are in some ways the opposite of an entanglement. The war last summer was not the American Air Force getting entangled in the skies above Iran. It was a very specific, precise set of strikes, principally against the Iranian nuclear facilities. Same thing with Venezuela. It was a surgical, very swift and very successful operation to get Maduro, and then straight out again. And I would predict that we will see the same thing here with this latest round against the revolutionary government in Iran. The last thing that President Trump wants to do is to get entangled anywhere. You're quite right. He campaigned that America would not get into, forever wars, that it has to have, troops on the ground in foreign countries for, as it has happened after 9/11, decades. It's quite the opposite of that. He wants very precise, targeted, sharp interventions. And on this occasion, with a very stated aim, as with the Maduro raid, a very stated aim of taking Maduro out from Venezuela and bringing him to justice in America. On this occasion, the stated aim of the president is that he wants to take the actions that he's taken, the orders of that he's given to the American Air Force, and that now he's asked the Iranian people to take their future into their hands. There is no desire in the administration in Washington to get entangled in Iran. And I just would add one other thing. I think one of the important things in the thinking of the administration, not as a president, but the administration as a whole, is that, of course, it has, as a lot of Americans have, post 9/11 forever wars fear. There's no doubt about that. But there is a very important longer term picture, which your previous guests have observed, which is that the regime in Iran that has been there since 1979 has been a stated enemy of the American nation since 1979. Donald Trump made sure in his statement this morning to mention that fact, that this is the regime that chants death to America and has done now for some 47 years. President Trump, has seen a window with allies in the region. He's seen a window to act, and to encourage Iranian people to act and to take this into their hands, but not forgetting that long-term issue that America has had with the revolutionary government in Iran. The long-term issue, including, just briefly, of course, and it's always worth remembering this, and he mentioned it in his statement this morning, remembering that, among other things, one of the reasons why Iraq went so very badly wrong after 2003 was because of the revolutionary government in Iran, was the fact that it was the Iranian forces who were handing IEDs over and taking them over to Iraq that blew up American service personnel. From mentioning the Beirut Marine Barracks bombings to those post-2003 endless attacks on American troops in Iraq, President Trump has clearly said, we will once again remind people that there is a price to pay for attacking American troops and American interests.
Vice President J.D. Vance said that there's no way that military action in Iran would lead to a drawn-out war. And obviously, the administration doesn't want entanglement. The American people don't want entanglement. But do you think it's possible for Trump to achieve the aims of this war without drawn-out involvement?
I think it is, absolutely. The surgical strikes on senior figures in the regime is absolutely crucial. But of course, as I say, the second stage is the stage that is in the hands of the Iranian people themselves. I think there are lots of things that it's important to understand about President Trump and his foreign policy, which often gets misunderstood. But one of them is that crucial thing that when he says something, he does mean it, and he does invariably act on it. You've noticed in recent weeks the number of people who said, President Trump said to the Iranian people when they came out onto the streets that if, he said to the regime, that if they carried out mass executions as they were threatening to do, America would step in. The regime in Tehran stepped back from some of the public executions, but it didn't stop the executions going on. It didn't stop the endless massacring of the Iranian public that turned out. But when Donald Trump said, we're going to come in on your side, the side of the public, and then it took a while, there were people who said, you see, he's let them down. He didn't mean it. I go back to this point. It tends to be the case that when President Trump says that he's going to do something, he does do it. And clearly, this is the window in which he's seen an optimal chance to attain his objectives.
I want to talk about Tucker Carlson for a second. Tucker this morning said that the attack on Iran was, quote, absolutely disgusting and evil. Reporting suggests that he's lobbying against the move and has implied that it will splinter the president's base of support. We can have seen that's already happened throughout other foreign involvement. What do you think of Tucker's response?
I mean, there's a line in Hamlet, the cat will mew and the dog will have his day. I mean, cats mew, dogs bark. Tucker Carlson makes, outrageous claims, and that's to be expected. Remember last summer, before the surgical strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities, he said that tens of thousands of Americans would die if American planes took to the air. It just didn't happen. I don't think he has any particular understanding of these things. He just has sort of belches of opinion. And that's fine. That's his right. Everybody can say what they think. But I mean, he's just been flat out wrong about these issues in the past. And principally, it seems, sadly, is just propelled by this desire to try to claim that America is basically run by Israel, the Jews, and simply does the bidding of Israel. This is what he says. This is what he does. This is what he believes. I'm afraid there's a number of formerly serious and prominent figures who just see everything through this lens these days. But it's important not to get distracted from what the actual story is, which is that the Iranian people have been repressed by this regime since 1979. This is about them. It is about them having a historic opportunity to actually take their country back. And just think of the number of times in recent decades, including the Green Revolution in 2009. Think of the number of times that the Iranian people have come out onto the streets to try to protest this regime in their country, even to try to topple it. Every time those internal security forces, you were just talking about the Basij militia and others, use unbelievable, brutal violence against the people and make sure that they get off the streets. This seems to be the best opportunity the Iranian people have had since 1979 to actually get their country back. And that is the most important thing at the moment, not the belches of various.
Just one more on it, though, because, Tucker might be wrong and outrageous, but he has a huge following and massive influence, particularly for a portion of the American right. Why do you think his followers, his fans, others on the right are so susceptible to his views and the sort of like conspiratorial line of thinking?
Well, unfortunately, it's a sort of low resolution thinking, which is, conspiratorial thinking is always like that. You have an omni explanation for everything, and in a complicated world, some people like the idea of having a single explanation for everything, a single conspiracy to explain everything. But flattering as that can be, and simple as it is for many people, it's never a good prism to look at everything. I mean, just consider the fact that, for instance, I mean, even this morning, a government like that in the UK, which is led by a prime minister who's once again, it's a sort of rather comic in a way, in a difficult time, but once again has done a press conference in which he said, "I just want to make completely clear that we are not involved in this," as if anyone thought that they were. But just remember that even those countries that are Britain and some of its European partners this morning that have said, effectively, we want to see de-escalation. Just note that even those countries have made important observation about the terrorism that the Iranian Revolutionary Government has been carrying out in their own countries. It's not just that the Iranian Revolutionary Government has been sponsoring terror in the region, launching wars in the region, colonizing country after country in the region, in the Middle East, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, and so on. It's the fact that they have continued and do continue to this day to try to carry out terrorist attacks in other countries. The British Prime Minister this morning, as I say, he's clearly no fan of this particular intervention. But the British Prime Minister this morning said that Britain has stopped 20 terrorist attacks just in the last year in the UK that have emanated from Tehran. Now, that's not a small thing, to have a terrorist regime that continues to send cells, to send munitions, to send hit squads, to carry out terrorist attacks in the UK, in Europe, in the United States of America. That's countries like the UK and some of its European allies have taken the view that that's intolerable, but they tolerate it. President Trump, by contrast, has taken the view that that's intolerable, and therefore he will not continue to tolerate it. And if this is the short surgical war that I would expect it to be, then there will be some howling from some of the MAGA base, some of the prominent podcasters and so on. Mm-hmm. But I think they will continue to make outrageous claims that turn out not to be true.
And it's not just on the right. I mean, on the left, we have Zohran Mamdani, and this was the state who's, sort of the face of the Democratic Party right now. And just minutes ago, he put out a tweet that says, "Today's military strike on Iran, carried out by the United States and Israel, mark a catastrophic escalation in an illegal war of aggression, bombing cities, killing civilians, opening a new theater of war. Americans do not want this. They do not want another war in pursuit of regime change. They want relief from the affordability crisis. They want peace." I'm skipping around a bit, but he added, "Additionally, I want to speak directly to Iranian New Yorkers. You're part of the fabric of the city. You are our neighbors, small business owners, students, artists, workers, and community leaders. You'll be safe here." What do you make of that response from Mamdani and that statement on the left?
Well, I mean, Mamdani has not succeeded in clearing the snow from the streets of New York, and he hasn't succeeded in clearing the piles of rubbish on the streets of New York. So, of course, for him, as a very ideological person, for him, this is a sweet spot to not have to deal with snow plows, but instead to make grandiose foreign policy statements about issues over which he has absolutely no say, no influence, and much more. Of course, if he does mean it, saying to Iranian New Yorkers they're safe, which is an important thing to say, he should have added, of course, shouldn't he, the caveat that that would include critics of the regime who have had Iranian death squads sent to their homes in New York, such as a hit squad sent to kill an Iranian exile critic of the regime in Brooklyn just a short while ago. Mamdani can't say that, of course, because that would require him to make an overt criticism of the revolutionary government and its ideology in Tehran. So instead, he does this a mixture of grandiosity and vagueness about it. Yes, I mean, that's what he should say. He should say, critics of the Iranian regime living in New York will be safe. That would be worth doing.
What do you make of the possibility of Reza Pahlavi taking over if the regime falls? You've met him. Do you think he's the right leader that Iran needs right now?
I think that this is a very tricky corner. There are many people in Iran and in the diaspora who do not simply want a return of the Pahlavis. My view with Reza Pahlavi is that it's important to take seriously his proposal to be an interim leader who could cohere the various factions inside the country and out. This proposal, which he's had on the table for quite some time now, is definitely worth taking seriously. There has always been a problem, and again, you've referred to it with previous guests, there's always been a problem internally and externally since 1979 with the number of different factions that exist. I remember in 2009, the protests against the regime opposite Iranian embassies around the world tended to have the protesters themselves segmented into different sections. I mean, 5 or so different sections, because the monarchists couldn't be in the same pen as the communists, and so on. And I remember a friend of mine, an Iranian exile, saying to me back then in 2009, we can't even unite when we're in opposition to the regime. And that's always stayed with me. There are all these factions. It would be disastrous if the forces inside Iran that are opposed to the regime and the forces outside that fell into factionalism. And that's why I do think that Pahlavi's most important role is if he could act as that convening figure. It's about the best thing I've seen on the table in the last year. But it's important again to state that this would mean that the future of the Iranian people is in the hands of the Iranian people. I think what many people would be opposed to is a leader being imposed on the country. But again, that's not in the Trump playbook. And I don't see it being anytime soon.
One final question for you. There's a way of reading what's unfolding right now, these military strikes, and drawing a direct line to October 7th, 2023, when Hamas, unleashed a massive attack, the largest on Jewish life since the Holocaust. Talk to me about that, about how that day reshaped the region and in some ways indirectly set the first domino onto what we're seeing today.
Well, it's interesting. In my latest book on democracies and death cults, there's a reason, which is about the last 2 years of war and the post-October 7th war. There's a reason why I started it with an account of the Ayatollah Khomeini returning to Tehran from Paris, which is that's where I see this war having begun. And that's the war that we might be now, I hope we are, in the end stages of. If you look back to October the 7th and the attack that Sinwar, with, of course, Iranian backing, launched against Israel. I think that the history books already see this as one of the biggest, most catastrophic military misjudgments of all time. When Sinwar launched the October the 7th massacres, the invasion of Israel by Hamas and others from Gaza, when he did that, I think, although he was obviously himself a psychopath and wouldn't have cared about this judgment or the judgment of history, just consider if he'd have ever expected that this terrible action of his would lead to the decimation of Hamas's leadership across the region, including in places they thought they were safe, lead to the destruction of the Iranian proxy of Hezbollah in Lebanon, including the killing of Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, would lead to the fall of Assad in Syria, and then would lead last summer to the destruction of the Iranian Revolutionary Government's nuclear capabilities. And now it seems the destruction of the Iranian Revolutionary Government itself. Sinwar was just one arm of this octopus, but the head of it in Tehran looks like it could itself now be decapitated, all coming as a consequence of what Sinwar did on October the 7th. It's an extraordinary thing. I think, as I say, history is already judging that what Sinwar did, as well as barbaric and evil, will probably turn out to be seen as one of the worst military misjudgments in history.
Wow. Well, Douglas Murray, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you.